The year out of high school was really tough for me, as I know it can be for most people, because we're trying to find our passion and our purpose. My name is Nathan Sankiewicz. I've done a few presentations in the past to high school groups, and I thought I'd put some of this content on YouTube. So in these presentations, I explain some of the hardships I went through and how I coped with the emotional pains coming out of high school. And I believe that some of this content can also help you guys. First, let me talk a little bit about my own journey. So growing up from a young age, my parents getting divorced when I was about 5 years old, it was a tough as a child having to choose between which parent I was going to go to work with and ultimately which parent I was going to end up living with. And I was always closer with my father, so I ended up living with him. And growing up, I always wanted to somehow not only grow closer to my father, but to get his acceptance, because I felt like I never had that. So through this, it was an emotional battle every day, trying to feel like I was worthy of his love. And I felt like I never was, because he never gave me the affirmation of it. And even though there was a lot of pain with my father, there was one time that really stuck out to me. We were talking about actual real stuff that was important and really mattered. And he sat me down and asked me what I wanted to do with my life. And I looked him in the eyes and I told him that I wanted to help people. And he started to cry, and he told me that not many people get that feeling. And I explained to him how I felt when I was helping people, and that it was something that I'd never experienced before, and this is something that I had to do. And even though there was a lot of pains with my father, this was one thing that from this point on, it really changed. It changed my vision of my life and what I wanted for my life. So through this, I went to the gym to try to cope with the fear of my father and the anger with my father, just to try to work on myself and try to find something that I enjoy for myself. And when I was working out, I would actually listen to YouTube videos, and I would listen to people like Alan Watts and Wayne Dyer and Les Brown, Eric Thomas. And I started to realize that there's another way to live my life besides how my father lived his life. And I was always, by trying to get the affirmation of my father, I started to become just like my father. And after listening to these wise people, I realized that if I wanted to truly help people, then I couldn't be just like my father. So this was very eye-opening to be able to see a new way to live my life. And after I left my father's house and was finally making decisions for myself, my whole life changed. Because my father's mindset was anger, bitterness, and close-mindedness, whenever we were in arguments, he would always try to be right. And me trying to be like him, I always wanted to be right too. And when we were both trying to be right to each other, it got us nowhere. It did not resolve any situation ever. So I started to realize this and tried to take a new approach to this. Instead of choosing to be right, I instead started to choose to be kind. In that meaning, I wanted to actually listen to what he had to say and try to understand what he was saying, instead of just automatically saying whatever would make me right. So being more understanding of the situation. And this brings me to what I would like to call my first universal truth, which is when we are given the choice of being kind or being right, always choose to be kind, and you will most often be right. Before I realized this, me always trying to be right, like I said, the arguments would get nowhere, nothing would get resolved. But when I chose to be kind, I was less in my ego and more trying to actually resolve the problem. Because what's the point of an argument if you're not going to get anywhere with it. All it creates is bitterness between the two people and anger, and it only sets the relationship between the two people backwards. But when at least one of the people in the arguments can choose to be kind, you can somehow, most of the time, find a understanding between the two of you. Now, of course, I'm not always successful in choosing to be right over being kind, because our natural instinct at first is to give back whatever we're getting. For example, if someone is giving me anger, my first instinct is to give back anger. If someone is giving me bitterness, I want to give bitterness back. If someone is being close-minded, I want to be close-minded right back. But the same goes for the other side of it. If someone is giving me happiness, it's a lot easier for me to want to give happiness back. And this brings me into the second universal truth, which is you get what you give. And whatever you put out into the universe, you most likely are going to get right back. So with this in mind, I became very conscious of the energy that I was putting out to the people around me in my life. Because, like I said, if I was giving happiness to people, they would most likely give it right back to me. And if I want a positive life, I have to give out positivity to get it right back. So if you want anger in your life, then just give anger first. If you want happiness in your life, give happiness first. And most of the time it will come right back to you. So to understand this, we have to understand that whatever you give into the universe, you're going to most likely get right back. Now, we don't always get back what we give. For example, with my father, I would try to give open-mindedness or peace towards him, hoping to get it back from him. But sometimes it didn't work out that way. And when this happened, I would focus on what negative emotion he was giving me. And instead of focusing on why he was giving me this negative emotion. When you can focus on why this person is giving you this emotion, you can better look at maybe what happened in their past or what situation they're going through right now that may be causing them to give you this emotion. Which brings me to my third universal truth, which is instead of focusing on what someone is doing, try to focus on why this person is doing what they're doing. And by doing this, we can better become more understanding and empathetic towards the emotion that they're giving us, and try to not only diffuse the situation, but also maybe help them with this hidden motivator that they have behind this emotion. So you might ask yourself, why should I try to be empathetic towards someone when they're giving me anger? Why should I focus on the why and not the what that someone is doing? And it's easy just to give the anger right back to them. But if my goal is to help people, and that's what I enjoy doing, then I have to try to become more empathetic towards them. And selfishly, I feel good when I help people. So it's important for me to try to become more empathetic towards their journey. Which brings me to the last universal truth, which is your life is not about you, but it is more importantly about everyone else around you in your life. The other day in the gym, I was training a client, and it was my last person of the day. And I had a long day at work, and I was tired, and I was ready to get out of there. And usually I try to really connect to my clients that I'm training and really try to talk to them about their lives and their problems, and try to really help them. I had never met this person before, and like I said, I was just ready to get out of there. So through the whole thing, he wanted to talk a lot, and I just wasn't into it, and wasn't my authentic self that I usually am when I'm training. And I kind of rushed through it, and we got to the end, and he told me why he wanted to come into the gym and start working out. And he told me that his wife had just passed away, and that he was really lonely, and he wanted to come into the gym and try to get healthy and be around people. And at that moment, the world around me just stopped, and I really reflecting on myself of how selfish I was being towards his time. And we get caught up in thinking my time is really valuable, my time is really important. Yes, your time is really important, but only if that time is spent enriching the lives of others around you. And this really hit me and highlighted this universal truth that at that time, in that moment, when I was training that person, that time was not about me, but was more importantly about him. And I didn't take advantage of this, and this really made me reflect on how I spend the time around people. And it just made me realize that sometimes the time you give to that person is way more important to them than the time that you're losing. I was more focused on, okay, in that hour I could be going home and relaxing and hanging out, but for him that could have been a time where he was really connecting to someone when he was at probably one of the most loneliest times of his life. So this really made me more aware of the people around me in my life and how I wanted to focus my time. Just like all of you, I have gone through hardships, which I call lessons, but somehow or another they all are turning into blessings. For example, the relationship between my father and I was the most difficult lesson, but it became my biggest blessing, because without it, I would not be on the path I am today. Before I was on this path, my need to be right or my ego controlled my life. But now, having these universal truths, being empathetic is more part of my nature. Now, just because I have these universal truths doesn't mean I don't have struggles or go through valleys. But now when I am in these valleys or facing struggles, I turn to these universal truths to not only help me out of them, but also to learn and grow from them. So to recap, here are the 4 universal truths that are now a part of my everyday life. They come from many sources, including Christian thought, Eastern spirituality, and many motivational videos. But these are the 4 that helped me the most through my struggles. The first one being, when given the choice of being kind or being right, always choose kind, and you will most often be right. The second one, most of the time, we receive the same kind of energy we give out to others, or we get what we give. The third one, try to focus on why a person is acting the way that they are, instead of what they are saying or doing. In other words, search for the subconscious motive behind what they are doing, especially if it is a negative emotion. And the last one, our lives are not about us, but about everyone else in our lives. And our goal should be to enrich the lives of others. I look forward to sharing more videos of some of my thoughts with you guys, and thank you for watching.